Hey, what's going on, everyone? Check out what's coming up this week on Legacies.
We live in Ontario. That's the problem. That's the problem. Let's be real.
You won't believe it. Like, you won't believe what I saw today. Like, it's real.
And it's legal.
Yeah, and
It's Corey Perry.
Oh,
Perry
no.
is apparently the curse of Corey Perry. Yeah,
The curse of Corey Perry. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to Legacies. I'm your host, Tom Ritchie, joined by my partner in crime, Mr. Wesley Bowles, executive producer and co-host.
Good afternoon.
How's it going, Wes?
Pretty good. I don't know if you got plans this weekend, but I'm kind of excited. Excited and maybe a little terrified. I've got a bachelor party to go to this weekend. 10 guys at a cottage up north. So, yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be, a little terrifying, though.
Jeez. Yeah. I remember your age demographic in those wild parties. I don't do that anymore. Yeah. It's more low key nowadays for me.
I don't do that anymore.
Will you be available again next week is the question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be back on Monday. I'll be partially back on Monday, I think, is the correct way to phrase it. But
Okay.
it should be fun.
All right. Plans we're trying to do. We're going to try and hit golf course with Ashton this weekend. We're going to try and do that. Apparently, the last time he golfed, he was like 5 over par. And I know you're not a huge golfer, and I suck. I mean, I really suck. But he's like, oh, I'm like, how did you do? He's like, oh, like 5 over. I'm like, yeah, okay. Did you keep track? Well, no. I'm like, okay. So it probably wasn't that great. So I'm going to see just how good he thinks he is.
I'm not great at golf either. I've never really been interested in it, but I went out, I think it was like a month and a half ago for their engagement party. And apparently my short game is incredible. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what they tell us, Wes, when we suck.
Yeah, I can't drive the ball very
you always
far.
You always get drawn in because your last shot, if whether you're paying 9 or 18, you just make this beautiful drive, and it just calls you back. You're like, well, I'm giving everything else up. I'm going all in on golf.
Yeah, I'm on my way to Golf Town to pick up an entire set.
Guess where I was last weekend, if you can't tell.
Rebel Records.
I made a trip down to see Mr. Grimm at Rebel Records. I had a album that he had ordered in I needed to pick up. Been sitting there forever. And, it's always great to get there. Obviously, we have not even close to his entire collection on the highflyer.ca. So if you can't make it to Cortland, Ontario, tiny little let, then you can shop there. But it's funny because we brought the dogs. And I'm like, even though Dave would let them in the shop, I'm like, I'm not bringing these little buggers in here. So Tanya and I switched off. And I'm like, I know she wants out of all our collection of albums, we don't have a Red Hot Chili Peppers. I'm like, that's strange. So I'm like, okay, go in and look around. I pulled a whole bunch out for you. So we go to switch and she comes up. She's got an armload of Red Hot Chili Peppers albums. And I'm like, can you save some for gifts? Maybe like, let's just pick one. Which one for today? And that's very difficult. My wife is a huge music aficionado. So I got her to narrow it down to one.
Which one?
Which album was it? Oh my God, I don't
Blood
remember.
Sugar Sex Magic, Californication.
No, it wasn't.
Was it one of the newer ones?
No, God, no. She would never allow that. It was a classic one. I forget. I can't even remember. But I got my De La Soul. I love the Chili Peppers too, but had to get my De La Soul. But anyways, and I got a Rebel Records tee and something else I can wear on the podcast.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. Speaking of golf, there is an event I'm very excited about coming up. But before Cannagolf Classic, there's Cannagolf Derby. And I've said this to you multiple times. I can't remember if I've said this on the podcast, but I love these events because they're drastically different than what we see as normal events. I'm not saying, sampling events and expos are not important. They're very important to this industry. But I love seeing these types of events that I'm not going to use Elevate. Oops, did I just use Elevate? That lift us out of the stigma, right? And Golf Classic, Cannagolf Classic, and Cannagolf Derby. These are the types of events that very much do that. So Cannagolf Derby, which we can't attend, obviously, July 6th. That's in Vancouver, I think. So if you can make it, go check it out. But one that I'm really excited about is 420 Affair. And I don't know if Jazz is nuts, completely off his rocker, but he's asked if I'll MC it. And I'm like, I can do that. Are you sure you want me to? I have a tendency to swear every once in a while. But obviously super honored that he would even extend that invitation. It's going to be a massive event, man, like massive. And you'll be there. We're going to be there doing what we do, but hopefully just mingling a little bit. Let's see.
The question I have, though, is which Dumb and Dumber suit are you going to be wearing? Is it the blue one or the orange one?
Ah, I never thought of that.
I'll wear the opposite, whatever you wear.
Okay,
we'll wear
let's
them
see if
together.
we can track some of those down. If you've got a hookup for some Dumb and Dumber classic tuxedo with cummerbund suits, let us know. That would be interesting. Fuck, that would be awesome.
Either that or the Austin Powers suits, the one with the frock on the chest.
Oh my God. Yeah, that would be good. I don't know if I can pull it off, but I'll certainly give it a try. Looking forward to that. Obviously, the event is very much retailer focused. So if you're a retailer, a buyer, a retail manager, those you get there for free. Full spread. If you're into booze, there's booze. I'm sure there's going to be multiple joint circles going on outside, not in the facility. It's a gorgeous facility we've seen there. We've been to this banquet hall before. But I'm expecting to see 500, 600, 700 people potentially at this event, which would be awesome. And the launch of the Astro Boyz, long anticipated lead up, and we've been waiting. We've seen, video. I think I'm going to be a little freaked out, to be honest. Have you seen some of the clips? Like, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, I've seen some of the clips, and I know you had that stuff done out in California, right? And they look great.
Yeah, there's one thing, there's one thing about seeing the process and how it gets to it, but the ultimate outcome still is so revealing, and it's just like the magic behind it, right? And you just get in the moment. So, might be a little terrified. I've seen some of those alien movies quite a few times, and yeah. Anyways, I know you're not a Stanley Cup chaser. You're not into the Oilers, but we didn't make it, buddy. We lost.
No, I watched. That was upsetting. I think the biggest win for that was the Stanley Cup made of joints that was being passed around Edmonton.
I did see that. Was there any indication of how many? Because it was made of joint tubes, right, or pre-roll tubes?
Yeah, it was made of joint pre-roll tubes, and I have the video here. I'll overlay the video over top of this, but the creators on Instagram, it looks like their account is Crater. But yeah, it looks like there's at least, if I'm looking at this video
like
right,
creator. Is there an 8 in there? Well, we'll get it up. Yeah,
I'll put the link to the account below. But yeah, there's got to be 200 joints tubes.
Wow,
that make up the Stanley Cup.
Is it all one brand? Do we know? That would be
it looks like it's all the same brand.
Okay, well maybe it was sponsored because
it's Station House. It's
Station
repurposed
House.
Station House packaging. Yeah.
Ah, okay. And Station House has some of those OG strains that I'm trying to get my hands on, I think. So, and also I think they've got distribution through Exca into Quebec, so we'll have to check that out. But anyways, no, that was wild. And you know what? Like, I know we didn't bring home the cup. It didn't come back to Canada. But listen, if you've paid any attention to the way the Oilers played this, they're winners, man. They're winners as far as I'm concerned. Like, coming back from a 3-game loss, just to have that game 7, 2-1. Messier called it right from the beginning. He's like, if anything, this is going to be a 1-goal game. And he was right. Messier isn't usually wrong. But anyways, they played their heart out. But I think the biggest thing for me is watching, because they, the last 5-6 minutes of the last period, they had their power team out. Like, and these guys don't play together a lot for reason, but the amount of ice time they had, you could see they were just gassed. The last couple of minutes, they were gassed, and you want to cheer them on and be like, come on, you got a little more in the tank. But meanwhile, they've been, their tank's been empty for the last 5-6 minutes anyways. So, anyways, as far as I'm concerned, they didn't lose.
Apparently there's a curse on one of the guys on the team. What's his name? He's played with, so the last 5 years, he's played on 4 NHL teams that were all in the playoffs, and he's lost his Stanley Cup chance 4 times on 5 teams.
Who's that?
5 years, 4 teams. I'm going to look it up right now. I got to find out who it is.
Kick him off. No, I wonder who that is. is the playoff beard thing still a thing? Like, I don't, because there were a lot of them sporting beards, but I don't know if that's a thing still.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm again. I wish I was into more into hockey, but was that? I think I remember that a little bit from high school when the guys were trying to grow beards.
Yeah. There was that.
It's Corey Perry.
Perry. No!
It's apparently the curse of Corey Perry. Yeah,
the curse of Corey Perry. Oh,
5 years, 4 NHL teams all had a chance at the playoffs and no go.
Yeah, that's gotta feel shitty, especially if it's superstitious bunch, hockey players and the followers. But I just can't believe the amount of beards. Look at Stuart Skinner, for instance. The dude's 25, Edmonton native. He gets a mustache and he looks like he's 40. He shaves his face and he looks like he's 12. So I don't know if this is all part of the playoff magic, but anyways, Cup didn't come back, but at least there's
him and I have a lot in common then. Him and I have a lot in common.
I guess. There was something I caught. I know that you're, the advanced world of technology that you like to live in. There's I think it's fully autonomous coffee shop that popped through one of the feeds. Octane Coffee. Does that sound familiar? Octane Coffee, like,
yeah, the one out in Milwaukee.
That's right. Yeah, it's in Milwaukee, and I don't know if I can get on side with this. It's reminiscent. So very early days for me, in a factory, and you could go up to these machines and they were the worst fucking coffee in the world. I'm talking like, 28 years ago. And you put some money, hospitals had them way back in the, early 80s, and you put money in, it's got some mix. It just spits out this cup of coffee that was horrible. But apparently you can place your order, tracks your location, knows when you're getting close and you're like a minute out, and then it brews it. And it's the technologies they're using are very advanced. Like they're not like Keurigs and stuff like that, where they're just, it's ground, packed espresso if you want it. And I don't know. What are your thoughts? Like, should we be going towards fully autonomous coffee kiosks in the future? There's a fucking fly in the studio.
I mean, I don't think it's a question of should we be going towards it. I think it's a question of how do we adjust to this new. It's coming whether you like it or not. Whether it's not just coffee. I think there's a lot of
any fast
elements
food,
of fast food and look at grocery over the last 5 or 10 years. Some of the experiments, because you've had things like Amazon Go experiments where they open stores where all you had to do was walk in, scan your QR code.
Is that still a thing? Is that going on?
I believe they closed a lot of those locations because they partnered with Whole Foods.
Right.
But I think they closed some of those. But I think that technology, regardless, is coming. Like it's
yeah. I think you're right, and it's probably a matter of pressure and profit margins, and staying in the future. For me, there's probably pros and cons, because I can't count the number of times my order's been fucked up going through a drive-through and you want coffee and it's not the right one.
But is that as a result of human error though?
I would say yeah.
Right?
Probably.
So are you getting a better cup of coffee?
No, that's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. Is like,
yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So, I put my order in maybe through an app. I don't know how they're doing it exactly, but it tracks your location, so it must. And then you get there and you scan your QR and it either brews it or it's ready. And it's like, here you are, sir. And it gives it to you. Obviously, it's not speaking, but that is probably the future, especially like I'm thinking, like, it's not like the food can get worse from some of these places. So like maybe they just get heated. Like I've seen these. We used to have one on the Revival lot. It was that pizza. Like there was a little pizza kiosk and you go up and put your money in and spit out a beautiful warm pizza. So yeah, I guess it's the future.
You got two paths here that we're on. Like it either ends up, I'm talking like 50 years from now, it's either completely dystopian future where AI and things have automated so much that
it knows when you're hungry.
Well, no, that we actually have the freedom and time to do what we want to do, and we can be the ultimate creatives and spend our time doing things we love.
Yeah.
There's also the other side of the coin where it just eliminates us all, and it's really the biggest mistake mankind ever makes. But I tend to be more of an optimist and think that in the long term, short term, it's going to be tough, but in the long term, this all, is a betterment for society.
I get it. We talk about freeing up time, but the problem is when we free up the time, we just fill it with more shit that it feels like with all the advancements in technologies, all of the tools available to us, everything going on, and especially now double down with your remote work, like our productivity, especially even with High Flyer Media, is fucking crazy. But I'm always busy. I'm like, all these things are supposed to alleviate some of the pressures of life. And I feel like, I always like to be reminiscent of for me, it was growing up in the 80s and times were a little bit simpler, right? And I'm sure that generation in the 80s, my parents and my grandparents were probably thinking back to the 50s and 40s going, oh, things were much simpler then. I don't know.
You know what I think our problem is then? I think it's we live in Ontario. That's the problem. Well, that's the problem. Let's be real with.
So we either need to go Maritimes or
Yeah,
out
we
west,
need to go.
BC.
We need to go live out on Taylor's.
Oh my God, yeah.
Deploy housing.
Although
or,
something does not tell me if we're hanging around with Colin for the day that we're going to be anything but fucking relaxing, swinging hammers, maybe putting trim in, painting walls, God knows. Yeah, I don't know. I'm all for it if it works and the coffee's good or the technologies are there, and I don't know. I think employment too, right? And I understand, times are changing, operations need to change as well, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are jobs that come in that aren't seen that replace all this. I mean, people said the same thing when cars first started coming around, right? Like horse and buggies were the thing, and it's like, what are you going to do with all the horse and buggy drivers and the people who employ stables and all that stuff? And things come in, and again, the short term, it really sucks for the people caught in that short term.
Oh yeah,
but over the you look at things generationally, it's usually better.
I guess. Hopefully I'm retired before I have to even worry about some of this stuff. I don't know. We'll see.
You'll have a robot wiping your ass when you're 80. That's it.
Yeah, great. With all the routine, I feel like a robot some days anyways. There's a fly right here. I'm not going to try and kill him. I'll disrupt the studio. Everything will fall over. Listen, a couple weeks ago, I don't remember which episode, we were sent a care package from Loosh Brands, Lee over at Loosh. And we did so I apologize in advance here because our audience that saw the episode or listened to the episode, we talked a little bit about Loosh, but I want to do them justice because I was an idiot and I'm showcasing product and the THC is blazing across the internet. And unfortunately, we can't share any of that breakout clip. And I want to pay a little bit of respect to Loosh and the different products that they have because because they sent it. I do believe in the products, especially the fact that they're using rosin and canna butters and really focused on that extraction process. So give me 1 second. I'm going to try and do this right. Now, listen, there's something. So I mentioned Steep Rock. Okay. So Steep Rock, they have these hash rosin hot chocolate, right? So you get 2 5-gram pods in here. And I'm like, I don't have a Keurig. Lee reached out and he said, listen, those were developed so you can just pull the top off too. Just dump it right into a cup and you can enjoy it. So now I've got a way to enjoy it. And don't worry, buddy. Don't worry. There's lots to go around. Don't worry. So we've got that. Obviously, when it comes to the cookie category or the edibles category in cookies, there's, Big Pete's treats. These are phenomenal. They use canna butter. I love that taste. I want to make sure that we're able to share this with the audience that is not tuning in, or maybe they listen to bits and pieces of our episodes. So this is incredible. They have, I think there's 3 different varieties that they use, but they're full spectrum canna butter cookies. And this is a chocolate chip cookie. Now, one thing that I did mention that I know, and you're going to be happy, you're going to be very happy with me. These are the freeze-dried peach rings. Wes, you'll notice there's still 3 in the package. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You haven't eaten any more?
Haven't eaten any more. I said it's been tempting. These are 10 milligram live rosin. Strain for these are slurricane. They may change. The fact is, the product is innovative enough that I just wanted to highlight this again. I think they're coming to market. I'm not sure when. Maybe if we are able to break this clip out, Lee or Loosh, you guys can comment when they'll be available. These are phenomenal. I want one right now. The texture it's not what you would expect at all. And they're using live rosin. Companies that use live rosin, they've got a near and dear right next to my heart.
Indeed. Yeah.
So anyways, hopefully we can break something out from that. Listen,
well,
Lee,
to be clear,
team,
I could have broken out the previous one, but it would have taken 6,000 hours of editing. And
Yeah, it's
blurring
not that
out
you
THC
can't. Yeah,
logos.
you'd be able to do it, but we've got shit to do. We can't have you spending that much time doing that stuff. So, love the Loosh product so far. I haven't tried every single one. They have a bunch of different ones under their umbrella and what they put out, but try it. And Lee, please bring those peach rings to market. If you're not, I'm convinced that they will sell very well. And I need water. It's crazy. Can we talk about the weather?
I don't think we're allowed to talk about the weather anymore.
Not anymore. No. Yeah, although yesterday was like there's a fucking tornado coming through and the sky was clear. Very weird.
Yeah, it was fairly windy and stuff here yesterday. It was pretty like shaking against the windows and shit, but
Yeah.
it is a little cooler, which I'm thankful for.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. So today's guest, Grant from Lite Label, you're familiar with the category now. Not that it's a new category. We're going to have Grant on from Lite Label. Looking forward to that. Saved you some of that product too. Love the product. I call them dog walkers, but
I'm a fan as well. It's a category that I think is much needed, and a category I'll probably spend a little bit more time into as well is the lower THC. I like that their mission is that they're aimed on being an accessible experience for the new user or the one who doesn't consume frequently, right, and has that low tolerance and
100%. I'll add this functional. I don't know how many times, like I can math, okay, right, and I look at the labels and I see this is this, but the guesswork of if I consume half of this pre-roll or half a nug, like how much am I getting? So knowing that you're getting a mid-level dosage of THC, it takes some of the guesswork away, right? And you know that you start consuming the whole thing, especially on a golf course, potentially, right? And all of a sudden you can't swing, you can't focus, you can't do math, you can't do anything. I love that it's not that they're creating it, but it feels like they're creating this market opportunity where some of these flowers and stuff that people are always, driven by potency and price, obviously, but it leaves room now for these, 17 to 20-ish% THC products. And I think that that's smart. So Grant has a great background as well. He spent some time at various companies that we're going to talk about. We're going to understand his lead up to Lite Label. So looking forward to that. Anything else that we should cover before we head to break?
I don't think so. I think today we're all set, so we can head over and we'll talk to Grant.
Right on. Okay, we'll be back after this break. Hey friends, guess what? It's almost t-shirt season. Are you ready? You should be rocking your favorite brand. Head on over to thehighflyer.ca and check out all the licensed cannabis brand swag that we've got available. From Odo to Victoria Cannabis Company, Smoker Farms, Royal Harvest, the list goes on and on. And there's more coming on every single week. Check it out, add it to your cart, and be prepped. Sun's out, guns out. All right, welcome back, everyone. We're joined by Grant Caton of Lite Label, co-founder. Had to clarify that just to make sure. There's other people involved. Grant, thanks for joining Legacies, man.
Yeah, I really appreciate being here. Thank you very much.
You're no slouch in the cannabis industry by any means. When we saw Lite Label come onto the scene, we're like, what the fuck is this? I like the idea of this. But then obviously reached out immediately and I'm like, tell me more, because it's a category and an understanding that I think our audience needs to be familiar with. One that you're obviously passionate about, otherwise Lite Label wouldn't exist. And we're going to understand Lite Label. I think what I truly want to understand is where this idea came about. And, based on research and our conversations previously, you're an active dad with, 3 boys. I think that's correct.
Yes.
In hockey. You've got a podcast. Do you not have a podcast?
We do. Yes. It's a GTHL or Greater Toronto Hockey League focused podcast. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I wondered, I'm thinking, I mean, you're around hockey parents all the time, and I've spent my fair share in arenas, believe me. And I started wondering, I'm like, was this part of the influence of being surrounded by hockey parents who need to remain functional? Functional is becoming a major category across all, right? Yeah. And I started to wonder, like, is there some sort of tie back to that, in that I don't want to get blasted at these tournaments. I just want to, I want to mellow out a little bit.
Yeah.
And where that came about. Let's do things a little bit backwards.
Okay.
Tell us where the concept of Lite Label came from first.
Yeah. So the concept of Lite Label came from, a variety of sources, I guess. my history is, like many in this space, good or bad, is from beverage alcohol. And I spent a lot of time, and I launched Miller Lite into Canada. And
wow.
so I spent a lot of time around this like light consumer in beer. And, I had about an 18, 19-year career in alcohol that, I got to really understand the customer and different things, and also some of the trends. And then for the last 6 or so years, I've come over to cannabis and kind of forgot about all that, to be honest, for the first like 4 or 5 years, because it was just a wild time, as you know, and we can talk about all that.
We're going to talk about some of that
good.
craziness.
Yeah, so we'll jump into that. But essentially, I saw a bunch of things happening, and one of them was, it kind of came to me one day that there was no light category in cannabis, and every time it did get talked about a little bit, and we kind of talked about it a little bit when we were doing product development and things like that, but it quickly went to this like wellness area, which is great and perfect and where it should go in many aspects. But if you come back to, legalize what we call recreational cannabis, there was just nothing sort of low and slow and light, even though that was what we,
That's
as
what we
the industry preached at the beginning to help grow the category, let people in on it that weren't here before, and, all those kinds of things. And so I just had this aha moment, which wasn't really stuff that hadn't been talked about or isn't in every other category out there. There was this gap in this sort of light recreational, call it fun category of cannabis. And that was the beginning of Lite Label. And then there's been a series of things that have sort of validated Lite Label along the way of like, great product on wholesale market that we can buy that fits this,
Right.
different formats that I know people don't want to smoke. So maybe they want to try an edible, and we could play around with that. And then also to what you were just talking about, is being a 45-year-old dad of 3, my neighbors and circle of friends, a bunch are into cannabis, but the ones that aren't, I was asking them questions why they're not, and many of them were fine with it. They were fine with stores opening around them, and like they were all pro legalization, but they were not participating in the category at all. Right. And I was always wondering why. And it was essentially, the products that were there were scary in many cases, or they didn't know how to go get them.
Dude, I find them scary sometimes.
Right? Yeah,
like
yeah,
seriously, I do. And I 35 years into this, and it's like, I don't know what I'm getting into today with some of this.
Yeah. And I'm sure that, lots of them are great, all but they just weren't speaking to that sort of consumer. And so that's why we started Lite Label. And then, since then, to be honest, we found even people that are in the, been around for a long time and enjoying cannabis, myself, is this other demographic of what I call the aging, person that's in cannabis that just does want something functional and lighter, but a little edge, doesn't want to have the 17 beers at the hockey tournament, might want to have 2 and a little walk around the parking lot, those kinds of things. And so it just felt right. And then, and then that's what happens, right? Ideas just start to spawn, and we got the name.
Well, we're glad you did.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing, is that, there's always a lot of dreaming, and we like to see, in this industry especially, it's all the action, right? Is taking that dream and making an action out of it. And now we're, talking about Lite Label. But I think that one of the things that I loved about what you've done is you've somewhat defined or bookend. I don't want to call it a category. It's not a category, but you've bookend the idea of light, because you're right. Like, there's so many angles I can look at this from, which is, it doesn't mean it's an inferior product. The terps are good. The product is great quality, but they're getting, think about the children. They're, these poor bulk lots of cannabis are getting left by the wayside as all the dominant players with their high THC are being sourced and made into pre-rolls or packaged and put out into the market. And you've got all this great quality bud that's sitting there. So one, I would think that's a major advantage for Lite Label, is that you've got a huge assortment to be able to choose from.
It's a good assortment. I wouldn't say huge, because, the growers and the wholesale market is definitely fine-tuning their craft to target the largest, market of the place, which is
makes sense.
High THC ounces, at the best price. Like, that's still going to remain. However, but there is many to choose from still, for sure, that are by the wayside. And in my, in my old world, there was many times where we had lots that came under, 19, 20%. And, rewind when we launched, having a 19 or 20%, it was like we couldn't keep it in stock. That sold out immediately.
If I could grow back in my legacy days, if I could grow a 20, I was happy.
Right.
I was happy.
Right. And then the way that we merchandised, the way that we sold, the way that we talked about, we just really always, THC was sort of the common denominator that sort of started dictating price. It started dictating categories. It started dictating everything. And so yeah, but going back to there is lots of good options on it, and on finding product on the wholesale market. And yeah, for sure, there was times what I was going to say was, there's stuff that we couldn't give away. I remember we had a bunch of stuff, and we had, we couldn't sell it, we couldn't package it, so we were like, oh, let's donate it to like a university agricultural program that wants to do testing on this, and we couldn't even give it away because like they already had some from other people, and like there was a lot of sort of trial and error during those eras. But the product was great, and so, and to your point at the beginning, there was no definition, and I'm not necessarily trying to define what is the light category per se. What I am trying to do is put out products that are lighter than 95% of things that are out there, particularly. So, so 20 was that benchmark. So we did a sub 19% flour. And then on the edible side, we just did as low and slow a dose as you could. So a 1 milligram gummy and a half milligram.
It makes sense. And it's funny because I remember the early days, right? Especially medical, working with so many clinics from Ample, especially, the message was low and slow, start low and slow. And, as time went on, it was like, well, where the hell do I even find a low THC dosed product? Like it's nearly impossible. Because again, it's the industry. And I think that we will see a shift, especially with all the talk about terpene dominance and the effects and the entourage effect. I think that's important. And it feels like we're shifting somewhat back to medical a little bit, at least paying some respect to the market that opened the doors for us in rec. But I think that what we're seeing is, your Lite Label for me is a pioneer into this side because it's one that just 2 feet, we're light. Right. And you were kind enough to send over samples, and I tried them. They got a high flyer approved right away. I'm like,
thank you.
These are ideal.
Yeah, that was nice. Thank you.
Ideal because I don't have to. I was saying to Wes earlier, I think it was this episode, or we were just talking, and I said, it takes the guesswork out. Like I don't have to. We've got a lot of brand partners. They produce fire flour. It's incredible flour.
The industry makes amazing stuff. Like
it's incredible. But I've got to look at it with my trifocals on to understand. Okay, this is 32%.
Right.
So and this is a half grammer. Now, if I consume half of this, I'll get approximately 16.
Right.
It takes the guess, and people are probably like rolling eyes and potentially, but everyone that knows me knows I'm legit. I don't sugarcoat anything. I don't blow smoke up anyone's ass. For me, the size and format, it's, whether you're calling it a parking lot or a dog walker or whatever, some people are defining some of these smaller formats as, but it was ideal. I didn't have to guess whether or not I'd be able to function. Which brings me to that point of, as a hockey parent, right? Or any parent that is socializing at any type of barbecue or, something, events are one that really stand out for me.
Yeah.
I think we joked about this when we first talked, is everyone wants to smoke, right? Everyone wants to consume. You go to an event, hey, let's go outside. Hey, you go to right? And I shy away from it because I'm like, dude, I don't know what you're burning there.
Right.
I don't know how lit I'm going to get. And I can't handle that, especially when I'm trying to conduct business or remember something. That's super important. So I love that. And so right now it's 10. Let me try and remember back because I didn't even look this up right ahead, which I should have. What an asshole, eh?
Okay. It's okay.
So it's 10 3.5 or 0.35s. Is that correct?
Yeah.
In a pack, and the format is great. The roll I question, and I don't know if I've shared this with you at first. I looked at it and went at the pack, and I'm like, the consistency is perfect across all the pre-rolls. They're a little loose, and I'm like, how are these gonna burn? They burn fucking perfect. Like they were perfect, and I did question it, but they did burn perfect. But you also have the edible side. That one I'm not as familiar with. I apologize.
It's okay. They just launched. Yeah. So they just launched. Otherwise I would send them to you. And so I was going to say, like, I'll send you some in the mail now. Or if I catch up with you at Kind or something like that. But so edibles. So we have 2 edibles coming that are out now. They're available in Ontario only right now. And they just went up on OCS.ca yesterday, and retailers have been able to order them for a couple of weeks, call it. And one is a 10 milligram, or sorry, they're both 10 milligrams for the pack, but one is a 10 pack of 1 milligram blue raspberry. And the second one is a 20 pack of 0.5 milligram tropical breeze, which are 5 flavors of guava, pineapple, orange.
That makes sense. One of the things that bothers me sometimes, and it's not to poo-poo on anyone putting out the products, is when you're spending $5-6 for a gummy.
Right.
A gummy. I get it. There's restrictions on what we can put in there.
Yeah.
It's 10 milligrams in each pack. Give
Yeah.
me 10.
Yeah.
Give me a handful of gummies at least. Like, give me something to
It's
consume.
funny, yeah. It's funny you say that because that's the two consumer. I talk about the bookends a lot when I talk about the product, and so the gummies are perfect for my wife, and I always use my wife as the consumer on that because she's been around me for almost 20 years, and so it's been
Congrats to
around
her.
thing.
No.
Yeah, no, for real. Yeah, exactly. But she, doesn't want to smoke, but she doesn't care. She's great with cannabis. She's fine with it, but she couldn't find something that she wanted. And, anytime we had gummies, she would take a bite, leave some behind.
Yeah.
And so I had her in mind. And when I've talked about the gummies, I always think of her and sort of that consumer, which is, I want to participate, but I want to just take an easy step into the product. And that's it. But then what you're saying is I have another great friend who is completely into cannabis, 100%, every day, all the time. Like it's part of his ritual. And he feels the same way. He's like, I just want a bag of gummies. I want to sit and watch Netflix
give me
and
a
eat
bag.
gummies. And so it's been funny that we've had a few people that are like, I didn't think would be our consumers on that side, but they're like, oh, I love how I want to eat 20 gummies tonight. And I get my 10 milligrams or my 10 gummies. So
yeah, it's unless you're pulling a surprise pack. And Wes, I know you got a question or something to add, but you could always insert the one infused amongst a bag of
sure. Yeah.
20 or 30 of them.
Like that hot Dorito chip.
Wes, what's up?
I'm curious, Grant. With I'm assuming you guys were fairly close to the end of product development on that when when Health Canada announced what they'd be doing in regards to packaging for edibles and being able to have more than 10 milligrams in the outermost packaging. Is there stuff that you're thinking now you would change or like in relation to those new restrictions that are going to be updated?
Yeah, good. I mean, great question. And the answer is no, I can't say when the restrictions came out, it really stopped anything we were focused on. I was pretty, when you just like have something in your head and you're going to run at it. And so I kind of had the two formats in my head for a while. I knew I wanted to be a 0.35 and the sort of a larger pack of smokes and a smaller, we have a 2-pack coming out. So very trial sort of. And on the gummy, I knew I wanted 10.5. And so I was really focused on that. But now that rule has come out, I definitely am thinking about it, but I guess if I'm being really transparent about sort of the plan is I'm not going to try to innovate my way to success here. I really think that we have some really solid products. I feel really confident about the products and I really want to spend some time on them. So as we're thinking about the innovation, we'll keep it in mind as we go. But really, and like, can we change form? Can we put, 3 packs in a bigger pack or however that wants to work? And I think we can play around with that easily, but we haven't really gone too far off the path yet. It's so early that we're just really trying to stay focused on it, but it definitely showed up on our radar and, we made note of it.
I love when Health Canada drops a potential of change and
Right.
I can just see a stack of papers going, well, that's out the fucking window. Now right.
Yeah.
But it's very timely because I've just revisited the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, and understanding like, do you just improve products or do you stay course? And affect change, be a change agent in an industry, right? And
Right.
That's always difficult. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes when it comes to this because it's difficult just navigating all of the complexities of the market. But again, and this is where maybe we start to add in, you're not new to it. It's not like, you're a podcasting hockey dad and you're like, I'm going to do this in the cannabis industry.
Right.
Dude, you've spent time at Canopy and at Legacy Brands over since legalization anyways.
Pre-legal. I joined Canopy just pre-legalization. Yeah.
So those are back like Tweed days,
Yes,
like
Tweed
original
Main
Tweed
Street.
days,
Yeah.
the Hershey Street, Hershey
Totally.
Factory days. Yeah. And I still remember that. I have a love story for that because to me it's here.
Yeah.
It's finally here, right? Like we're seeing this now. What were the early days like back then? Like,
Well, I tell you, I mean, there's a whole story how I got there, but when I went for my, call it interview in person and I showed up, it was a few days before Christmas of 2016 or 17, I can't remember now. And I remember, legalization was coming and I had from the beverage alcohol side, we had heard of it and we knew it was kind of coming because we were doing things like scenario planning, will it affect our volumes and all those kinds of things. And so I was looking at it, but it wasn't really sort of deep into it. I remember I had the exact same thought as you. I got to Smith Falls and met an HR person in the front lobby there. And she said, oh, before we go see, Mark and Bruce or whoever I was meeting, I've been told to take you on a tour. And I think that was part of their plan, because you go on this tour, and if you've never been,
They want to awe you.
yeah, you're just like, what is happening? And I was walking around just, what at the time was a smaller part of Smith Falls, because they were still building onto the back and whatnot, and seeing these rooms and these plants and the pharma grade facility, and, all the resources going into it, and people walking around, and you're just like, what? My mind was blown, if I'm being honest.
Yeah,
I remember
bet.
coming home and being like, speaking to my wife and being like, you won't believe it. Like, you won't believe what I saw today. Like, it's real.
And it's legal.
Yeah. And like, they're selling already. And, I was trying to like couldn't even catch my breath on it all, on how everything was. But it was, so that was the beginning of it. And then, yeah, I mean, it was a real run of crazy times, early days, pre-legalization, getting ready for it at a place like Canopy, because there was, the world was watching Canopy.
Of course.
A lot of eyes on it. It was, they were, the leadership team at the time of Bruce and them were out raising lots of money, making lots of noise, which was, brought a lot of resources in, but brought a lot of attention, brought a lot of stress, and, and then, it was on the shoulders of us who were leading sort of the recreational lead in here, at the time, a lot to plan for. We launched,
couldn't imagine.
they had, launch was 80 to 100 SKUs, and we got them listed across the country, and, started getting POs before legalization and trying to fulfill them. And then, really, disappointing a lot of people along the way, from short shipping, because you're just still trying to figure out harvest dates to forecast the shipping patterns. And so sometimes you had a gluttony, sometimes you didn't have enough, sometimes, all those kinds of things. And so, yeah, there was a lot of lessons learned, I think, for many people through those early days.
Yeah.
But all really, fantastic people, really trying hard. And those days, early days at Canopy, were really something special. You felt like you were part of something that had some great momentum. We built a solid team. We had a ton of fun. And, everyone was learning. I think that's what everyone forgets, is like, those days, the government boards were learning, the regulators were learning, the advertisers, the agencies that were learning, the retail people were learning, the supply chain was learning, the LPs were learning, so it was just a calamity.
Yeah, you got a bunch of infants across the entire industry going, okay, give me this. Yeah, like you have no idea.
Even though the industry's been around for hundreds of years, in this new world, it hadn't been, right?
Yeah.
And so
supply chains being one of the biggest bottlenecks, right? And understanding, like, how do you plan production?
We
right?
used to have armed guards from oh gosh, I forget the name of the company, Brinks, that would ship our wholesale product from one side of Smith Falls to the other where we had production, because we were trying to read the rules. We were being over cautious on all the rules, so we would transfer product.
Well, there's no guidelines either.
Right? And you were guessing a bit, and we didn't want to do anything at the time. Well, I'm sure they don't want to do it. No one wanted to do anything. This isn't a Canopy thing, but to lose your license or to put anything
Always
at
worried
risk,
about
because
losing
you were
license. Yep.
you were you felt like you were under a microscope, and so you really we overdid it on packaging, and we overdid it on delivery, and we there was lots of things we overdid.
I remember the early days packaging and the jar in a box and all these things going on. And I think the thing that bothers me a little bit about current industry is everyone wants to shit on Canopy, and they base a lot of Canopy on the last year or 2 years, and not realizing, look, guys, Tweed was the originator. They're kind of the all in. Everyone, crazy Bruce Linton, and all this stuff going on, and every time Bruce takes a shit, there's a press release for good reason.
Right.
Like, you've got a young, immature industry looking to raise capital to do as much as they can, and honestly, at the time, you don't even know how much capital you need. Like, was there misspending? Potentially, but it's like, okay, are we going to need this? Oh, we need this. Oh my God, we need that. We need to hire in this area now. Now we need, we need to ship product. We got to get Brinks. Because again, not necessarily any guidelines coming out from Health Canada. I still remember Wes and I scratching our heads over Cannabis 2.0 and going, how the fuck? We can't even make sense of, now our customers have to report on how much data, right? So the early days, but I say a lot of those lessons learned, and thank you, Canopy, for making some of those mistakes, right? And helping us to learn that, hey, one, your operations need to get tight, your supply chains need to be tight, your relationships need to be tight, and helping us to understand how to reposition and maneuver in the industry. Otherwise, we'd still be chasing our tails.
Yeah. I mean, Canopy, was a really interesting place, because on one hand, I think you can say thanks, Canopy, for sort of running down brick walls and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
making sort of the bets and, you know, a bunch didn't pay off. And so they become lessons, right?
Right.
On the other hand, I think you can say, you know, over time, you know, Canopy, you know, with so much eyes on it and so much resource, you know, probably did need to take some lessons from elsewhere to clean things up quicker at the same time too. So it's a, you know, it's a bit of a both sides of that fence, but definitely the early days was, you know, over engineer things for sure, because we were very nervous about losing anything and we knew we were under a microscope. And, you know, and truthfully, the organization was able to raise a bunch of resources to be able to kind of do that, I guess, you know, overprotect things in a way. But I think to a point, it became, you know, a tough thing to swing back out of when you know, it was time to get rid of the big black box packaging thing. And that was a real hard swing, you know, and we had to write off a bunch of product, you know, because of that. And, you know, and so there's a bit of like hindsight 2020 for sure. But, you know, in one side, you can thank them for, you know, all the stuff they did trailblaze and break down and bring attention to the category, you know, the mistakes they made. On the other hand, you know, for sure there's, you know, times in Canopy where, you know, there needed some more structure around things to make the better decisions on where.
For sure. And some of that's just the result of rapid growth too.
For sure.
Right?
Oh,
Which is you're trying to, right? And in tech, it's no different. It's, you know, in manufacturing, we always say in manufacturing, you can staff up and work overtime to be able to meet demands. In tech, you need to hire, get your developers familiar, and then they develop for the future, which is hopefully going to have some sort of outcome and payment, right? So drastically different. Were you at Canopy during the Seth Rogen houseplant?
Yes, I pitched.
Days, were you?
I pitched myself and a few others brought Seth and Evan into the OCS NBC LDB on 2 different occasions and it pitched houseplant into it. So
interesting.
all the way through. Yeah. And then
and what
Snoop
was
Dogg,
that? What was that like?
Oh, houseplant. Yeah. Houseplant was really exciting. So, you know, that came about a year, I would say, after legalization when it really started to come through. We had some early innovation plans with the houseplant team. They had a little team. And, you know, the way I remember Seth always talked about it, he was like, you know, when you buy a pair of Nikes or an iPhone and you get the box and then you open the box and the tissue paper is like perfectly and it's branded and you rip it open and you pull out your shoe or whatever, the iPhone, whatever one he was talking about at the time. He's like, it's a whole experience. And you know, he was like, that's what I want for my cannabis. And so when we first launched Houseplant, if you remember, it came in a fairly heavy jar. And that was in a box.
Still have one.
I don't know if you remember, it came in a box.
Yeah, mine didn't come in a box. Mine was after that, but I remember,
and the whole premise was, you know, you buy the box of Houseplant and you open it up and you get it in there. And so, yeah, we launched pre-rolls and the flower. But again, that was at an era, I think, where the quality of flower that, you know, was moving quickly, you know, and the expectations as it should be. Because I think today, like, you know, today it feels like table stakes, but, you know, rewind 4 years ago, it was like, you know, we're growing this stuff in huge greenhouses at scale. And, you know, there was a lot of challenges I think people had on the quality of it, which I don't think helped necessarily a bunch of the flower products that were coming out. But he also launched a drink, if you remember, Houseplant Grapefruit. That was probably the most successful Houseplant product that we had in Canada.
I was not familiar with that. No.
Yeah. It was one of the first drinks to get launched and it did really, really well. But then over time that contract with Canopy dissolved. And so then all those products shifted to either be Tweed or...
Part of it must have been the royalty. Was it even called a royalty?
Yeah.
It was a royalty? Okay,
sure,
so... Because I know there was a lot of weirdness around what Health Canada was deeming possible and impossible. But
yeah, I don't know that. Maybe I shouldn't say anything of the term, but yes, there were, you know, they were.
There's some sort of kickback going, obviously.
Yeah, there was an agreement there for sure that Houseplant had, and
and
because when we launched, we had Houseplant, we had Leafs by Snoop or LBS at the time, and then there was a small time when we were we had a partnership with Drake, but that product actually never came to life.
Was that Bull Rider?
No, what was Bull Rider was his producer. Drake had one called True Life, I think it was what it was called.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
But we did all the product development, we did the packaging, you know, we did everything, but then it just, you know, the pendulums, you know, when, you know, there was a huge swing. There's been a few sort of swings at Canopy when I was there. And so there was sort of one of those swings, a restart, if you will, get the house in order. You know, some new management came in. Okay, let's take a look at our portfolio. Let's take a look at costs. And that's when it really the shift came to let's focus on the products that we own.
Got it.
Yeah.
So that wasn't enough for you.
Right.
After Canopy, you decided, I'm going over to Galaxy. What?
Yeah.
We don't know enough about Galaxy brands. And I think our audience probably doesn't either. They know the products. They certainly know the products that Galaxy puts out. But what was that shift? What was hey, I've got to do something different?
Yeah. So the truth is, after 5.5 years at Canopy, finishing there sort of over at the time, we had just wrapped up. We had sold retail off at Canopy.
Yep.
That project sort of wrapped up and was done. We had relaunched the medical platform, and so with Spectrum Therapeutics, so that was sort of up and running and has been and doing well. And we had reset sort of the portfolio. And so, as I was exiting Canopy, I knew I wanted to do a few things. I was sort of, I think we were done with Canopy and us we were ready to break up, but I wasn't necessarily done with the industry. I continued to look at the industry with there's so much opportunity, and I like the people, and I like the industry, and I like dealing in it. And so I knew I wasn't quite done, and I had the idea of Lite Label sort of in my head, come to life sort of as I was, right after I left the door. And so I spent last summer, sort of planting the seeds, if you will, around Lite Label. And that led me to find, reach out to different LPs to be the LP on record to help get the product out. Cause I knew I wasn't about to go raise like $70 million to buy a facility and start there. My starting point was around the brand and try to find people that already have facilities and production facilities. And so that led me to Galaxy. And so as I was working through the Lite Label agreement and the idea around it, got to know the team there, and the idea of coming in for a few months over the last year as the president, just to help them sort of get to where they are today, is sort of what I did. So I was able to be the president of that over the winter, and I left there again in just before Lite Label launched, which was perfect, ideal. It was a great time to come in, but really Galaxy was a combination of it is Galaxy and Wagner's sort of brands. The Galaxy facility, they both had filed for CCAA and had sort of fallen apart. The new owners came in, sort of amalgamated them together. So they basically have the old Wagner portfolio plus a whole bunch of new portfolio items. Have the one facility that they've turned into a high-end production automation facility, and they operate that way. And they've been a great partner of mine. So that's where Lite Label is from and made. They have some really great automation, and they've got their brands out there that they still work on, like Wagner's and Highland and whatnot. And and so they've just been carrying it on the facility there, and they do a great job. They're really focused on that post-production as you were going back to your pre-rolls, like they have really great machines. They test them. They really make
Needs
sure
to be done right.
It's really the devil in the details on what they do there in terms of that kind of stuff. And that's a little bit about what they do.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. And is because Dog Pounds is still in market, correct? Are they not under Galaxy?
No,
So.
Dog Pounds
they're
is
not.
under
Okay.
Atlas. I believe
Atlas.
now.
Okay, Atlas. Got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
'Cause I do remember the Leaves era, right? They
Leafs
had
by
there was
Snoop.
Dog Pound Leaves. Yeah.
Dog Pound. Yeah, the Leafs by Snoop brand we had to change to LBS because of the name. But then then again going back to when Canopy sort of reset the portfolio to be its own portfolio.
Yeah.
That agreement left, and then popped back up about a year and a half later with Atlas, and I know they've been working through that.
What are your largest triumphant moments within the industry so far? Ones that you look back on and you go, man, I did that. I like that. Or maybe it wasn't just you, but ones that just keep you going.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good question. I think, the first few years at Canopy, we did a annual sales meeting. And they were just such a cool event to be able to put on and be part of. And because it brought the whole organization together that was really doing Canadian cannabis. And at the time, you're talking about 1,000, 1,500 people. We brought them just outside of Smith Falls into Canada at the Brook Street Hotel there. And we would take it over, and it was like, we used to call it like cannabis camp or weed camp, because it was like a week long. We were learning about the brands, we were learning about production, we were learning about the facility. It was a true traditional sort of annual sales conference, if you will.
Yeah.
And those things aren't cheap. They cost a lot, especially when you're trying to bring a whole bunch of people in for dinners, lunch, hotels, travel, all that kind of stuff. So I feel pretty blessed and pretty awesome, because I think that really formulated the relationships that have carried on to now, because a lot of the people that are there are no longer there. They've gone to other places and they've gone across the industry, but you've been able to build those networks. And I think it's really important to build those networks face to face as much as you can. And so, Canada's a huge geography. So being able to bring everyone together, those were really epic weeks and events. And I don't take them for granted. And I look back at those as some of the most fond memories we had. I think obviously having some cool experiences, sitting in the BCLDB boardroom with Seth Rogen pitching Houseplant.
That's pretty fucking cool, man.
Or doing that at the OCS office, and then bringing him down into the main office, and he just stood there for 45 minutes.
What's he
signing
like
autographs.
in person? Is he anything like?
Yeah, he's a businessman. He's a businessman for sure. Yeah, no, he was all about cannabis. That's for real. We would leave the BCLDB meeting and he would step aside and light a joint. It wasn't like it was fake.
It seems like Evan's the more buttoned up of the two, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, Evan, they were kind of the same. They're really nice guys, really approachable. We met them at a diner outside the BCLDB and had eggs before we went into the meeting, and had we ordered poached eggs and talked about what we were going to do. And I sort of ran them through, okay, we're walking into a government board. The government boards operate like this. They have
Was
a
there any
pricing model.
favoritism at all because it's the BCLD? Oh my God, it's Seth Rogen and it's BC.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it made sense, but I think it made sense for us to just sort of be able to have Seth in the market and say, hey, I'm taking this seriously.
Right.
I'm going to participate. We have weekly, and it was true. There was a period of time where it was weekly calls. What color is the packaging? Can we see the bud structure? We went into detail all the time.
Did Seth ever at any, and sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but if I don't ask the question, did Seth ever at any point go, what the fuck? I can't believe the requirements.
Yes. Oh gosh. Yeah. I would say the one thing is he'd been living in LA obviously for the last, 25 years or something like that. Yeah. You could tell that he lost some of that, things were normal for us in Canada, especially for us that are dealing with government boards, whether it was alcohol or regulated cannabis, where it's no, this is normal that, you have to go through it. Because one time we picked him up from the Collision conference and he was sitting there talking to an MP. I forget which MP it was. And he was just going off about the rules and why it can't be open on marketing and why. And then I was like, okay, it's time to get in the van. We got to go pitch the OCS. Let's go. And, but yeah, no, definitely he was very interested in it, very committed to it. And overall it was a really cool experience. And same sort of with Snoop Dogg in a different way. He came to our offices and we had to do a performance review. Here's how LBS is doing and, all those kinds of things. And he's just sitting at the boardroom
I've
table.
heard he is a straight up business guy. He pays attention to the numbers, but who knows, right? There's so much fodder out there.
No, yeah, he knows his business for sure. I mean, you can't deny it. I mean, the guy's a billionaire, I bet.
Super fucking successful.
Yeah. I just remember, we were talking about Quebec at the time and trying to explain the different rules of Quebec, because you kind of finish explaining cannabis to someone and they're like, oh, what about Quebec? And you're like, right, let's start it again at the beginning, right? Okay, so Quebec, you can't have over 30%. You can't have them anything over 5 milligram. They only have their stores. It's a, so you realize you kind of explain it and then you have to kind of explain it again. And so we were in that mode of explaining, because LBS Sunset was the strain, had done really, really well in Quebec. And he was like, we should do a pop-up there or a concert there or something.
Right.
And we were like, no, you can't. The regulations would be very tough. We have a really great relationship and we still do. And, blah, blah, blah. And I just remember him being like, so he couldn't understand why he couldn't, get into Montreal, because he loves Montreal too, and just start, and so at the time, and this again was very early on, there was fires every day, all the time. The whole thing was on fire all the time, it felt like. So we were always tiptoeing around, let's not push the envelope too far and stuff. So trying to explain that to him was a lot of fun. But there was tons of moments in there. Yeah.
We do take for granted, especially when we've been in the industry and we're talking to either a newcomer or someone completely outside of it, is we take for granted, we're just used to it, right? We're used to different rules here, different rules there. And oh no, you need to read this one. And oh no, well, the Cannabis Act only enacts the regulations and vice versa. And you need to do this. And Even in marketing. I mean, we work with a ton of brands, and we'll talk about, marketing just in swag.
Yeah.
And they're like, I can't do that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, we didn't say you can't.
Right.
The regulations say you can't. But you can do it if you want.
Yeah.
It's completely up to you. And it's like, how far do you
Totally.
want to bend the rules? Right?
Yeah.
Are you going to bend them and break them? Then, maybe you get a ghost drop situation on your hands, and, you're always going to have the agents at your door.
Yeah, we were always fearful. Early COVID, right when COVID hit, I'll tell you this story is we were, obviously everyone's trying to figure out what's happening. The world's shutting down, the stores are closing down. And so we had this idea, because we owned, or Canopy owned a company called This Works, which was like lotion, like hand creams and
Oh, okay.
topicals and stuff. And so they had made a bunch of hand sanitizer like really quickly. And we were like,
Yeah.
let's make sure all the retailers have hand sanitizer. Make sure we like be good Samaritans and be part of the community, and like who knows what's happening here, but like we know it seems like hand sanitizer is a good thing to have. Let's get that out the door.
Throw some Windex on
And
it.
we got fined for doing that.
What?
We got fined from one of the provinces for doing that because it wasn't what we were hired to do and wasn't our space.
Oh my God.
And so you really get you kind of start swinging, and you try to make a plan without the regulations in place, because it will just crush your creativity. And then you kind of try to bring the regulations on top to make sure you can execute and stuff. And then, you try to do something like that, and it just like reminds you, like, right, okay, well, they're not wrong. Technically, they're not wrong. Technically, we were.
But I mean, some lenience when you're trying to help would be nice. And that's where when we speak to some that are newer to the industry,
Right.
bringing a brand in, they may be operating out of BC or something, and we'll say things like, you can't have non-cannabis products in an Ontario retailer
Right.
location. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
They're like, so I can get baked and get the pasties, but I can't buy a bottle of water?
No.
They're like, nope,
Yeah.
can't have that.
Yeah,
I'm like,
we did
that
the
doesn't make any
same.
sense. I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, didn't write the regulations, okay?
Well, because when I had the Tokyo Smokes and cannabis retail
Yeah.
under me at Canopy, and we had like books and pillows at in the swag, and
Yeah.
the different provinces would carry different things, and at some point a lot
Keeping
of that
track
stuff,
of that must have been a nightmare.
Oh, it's
Like trying to
crazy.
understand what you could have in this one versus that one. We still go into certain retail locations in Ontario, and they'll have brand swag, and we're like,
I don't know.
we don't
Yeah.
mind that you carry it, you're not allowed to carry it.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean? I'm
Yeah.
like, it's right in the regs. You can't do this. It has to be your own, if it's trees or whoever, it has to be that one. It can't be, other brand swag.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, in the world of marketing, obviously we want, and you've spent a lot of time in that world of marketing and sales and understanding that, but seeing some sort of relief on that side, I don't want it to be an alcohol side.
Right.
I'm not looking for that, but I'm looking for sensibility. Right?
Yeah.
And-
No, I
and
think that will come over time.
It will,
It's
yeah.
just, the pragmatic approach to it, I think, is critical for the success. I want nothing more than it to be, a little bit more accessible to people and try to expand the opportunity for cannabis. I think it's a fantastic item for everybody and does a
Yeah,
lot of good,
absolutely.
and I'm a big advocate of it. But yeah, I just, I don't know if it ever really sits at the top of the priority list of those that actually make the change. And so,
Yeah.
I
I
think,
could
Yeah.
assume it's not.
No.
Not with so many other things going on.
yeah, it's funny, when I was at Canopy, we had a bunch of Americans obviously come in as part of the leadership team over time. And,
Yeah.
again, we would sit with our GR team and explain, yes, okay, so we're going to like lobby for this, but like it'll probably take 2 to 5 years on this one. And they were just like, no, in the States, we're going to just like
Yeah.
lobby, and we're going to push them over and run them and tell them we're not voting for them or whatever. And they're going to do it
Yeah.
and change. It was just like, again, that like separation between the Canadians and the Americans was pretty funny at the time. But yeah, it's just, same with alcohol, generally slow. And then every so
Yeah.
often Doug Ford makes an announcement like, yeah, we're going to sell booze in corner stores. And you're like, well, gosh, okay, that just
Oh
happened.
my
But,
God. I
it's
remember the
just a
early
slow-
days.
Yeah.
Even the early days is, it's going to be all provincial. And then, we're going to have a lottery. Fuck the lottery. Everyone
Yeah.
can do it. If
Yeah.
you got money, you can do it. But you got to build it first. And then
Right.
we'll license you.
Right.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
so many livelihoods just sunk overnight.
Oh yeah, I mean the OCS. When we first pitched them back pre-legalization, it was the LCBO model, right? And so we
Yeah,
we saw a mock store, we saw the layouts, we saw like how they were going to staff it, and then the provincial government changed, and then then it went to we're not going to do the stores anymore. And at early
Mhm.
days of that, it was thought to be a hybrid, so kind of like the BC model, but then that totally got squashed with the private retailers taking the opportunity to leverage themselves in and saying you don't need that. And so obviously that happened, and then it was like the 20 stores, if you remember. Obviously, I know Lisa Bigioni was talking about it, and the lottery and all that. And then it just sort of like floodgate. And then through COVID, it was like, I know they had a goal to get to 1,200 stores over the course of a year. And I think they went from like 400 to 1,200 in like a 12 band there.
Yeah. Been crazy. So on that, I do want to touch about that. Has with Lite Label, I want to draw a line back to the Bev Elk, if we can. Yeah. But with distribution, there's a lot of chatter around wellness, and if it's, you mentioned this right on the onset, when you're a lower THC, they typically start to classify you as wellness, and then I see posts about wellness is this and wellness is that, and I'm thinking, okay, well, hold on, like, first of all, let's not box it in, right? We need to understand that, number one. Has distribution's fucked.
Right.
I'll just start with that because we go province to province. West
sure.
knows.
Yeah.
Like, we've been talking a lot of distribution lately. Is it more difficult? Like, how do you promote? Because we're using this as an opportunity as well. And I know you've done PK sessions, you've done these things.
Yeah.
When it comes to educating a bud tender, I mean, it can be as simple as, listen, it's a product between this THC and this THC range. It's not a wellness product. It's for those that want to remain functional. Yeah. Functional is huge right now, especially in the Bev Elk side. But what is distribution like for Lite Label and yourself? Like, is it still pounding the pavement? Yeah. Get into the retail. Do PK sessions. Do pop-ups.
Good question.
What is working and not working these days?
Yeah, so I think learning all the lessons I did at Canopy, I knew not to spend. I try to spend as little money as possible, at first, because it's a really tough industry and there's so many products, and so the whole concept around it, just, I tell you this because I think it gives a bit of context, was get the idea, got it, execute against the idea, get it made, find a partner, find out what the SKUs are going to be, apply, get them listed, all that legwork. Okay, good, check mark. Get it into market, talk to a few people I know in the industry to help get it out into some stores, and then read the room. And that's where I sort of landed in the last sort of month. It's like, read the room. Is this like a right SKU? Is this the right brand? Am I talking in the right category? Am I making sense to people? And so in terms of distribution, Ontario, that was the plan. And so we're in about 100 and 120 stores, I'd say, today. A lot of them are just people I've met over the course of 6 years and just calling in, in some cases calling in a favor, for sure, saying, hey, do you mind carrying this? In other cases, I knew them and I've done a real pitch. And I said, this is what it is. And this is, and I would say 9 out of 10 within a minute of pitching, I get, this is for me, I'm the buyer of this huge chain, or you've made something for me, and I'm like, great. And so they get it. And a lot of people get it right away, that there's this light category that hadn't existed before. We decided to bring it, and we've tried to do it in a way that's not, we're not blatantly out there saying we're not wellness, because I don't know, like, it's a gray line on what's wellness, how people treat.
Let them choose
define
it. Yeah, let them choose.
We just really wanted to be sort of light THC. We're not trying to promote like we'll fix your knee or we'll make you sleep better or anything like that.
Sure.
Just light fun. Our tagline is stay social. I think that's really important. We lost a lot of that through COVID, and I'm a very social person, so it's like it all kind of fit. And so as I go out there now I'm in that phase of reading the room, feels right, looks good. How do I now sort of get it to more places? And that is definitely, last week I had a meeting up in Guelph, so I hit like 6 stores on the way up. I planned my way up, and I hit the stores on the way up, and some are like, cool, I'll pass it on. Others are like, that's really great, like, for sure. I went into one store in Guelph called Ronan Cannabis, and they already had it. I was like, wow. I was like, it was like that was a moment. I'll tell you, that was a moment. Did you ask them?
So this is where those early days, Bev Elk and understanding, what made you order this product? Why are you stocking this product? And what was that conversation?
Yeah,
what was
and it was
that
just like, oh yeah, no, it's great to have a light option for people. We have people that come in that are just like, I need something light, and and so we saw this on the buy order sheet, and we thought we'd give it a shot, and and so it was,
because that stands out as a brand name. It stands out. I mean, I've seen what the catalogs look like, and you're going through, and it says TDS Excel, and boom, there's light. I mean, it's in the name. It tells you.
Yeah, well, it was somewhat done by design, to be honest. Like the name Lite Label, I'll be the first to admit I didn't love it out of the gate. My partner in it was the one that was like, this has got to be the name, because, and he was just like, we got to make it so easy that people understand what it is, right? I automatically put my creative hat on. I was like, okay, we're gonna call it this because of that, and cool name this, and it was cool font. And he's like, no man, just Lite Label. And I remember seeing it, and I was like, oh, that's so boring. Like, I don't know, but I've really changed my tune on it. I think it's a really, like, I think how he's designed it and put it together, I think is fantastic.
It's
and then
fantastic.
really
Yeah.
the winning point of it is you see it, you say Lite Label. I think, majority of the people kind of get
Most
it right
understand
away.
it. Yeah. Yeah,
just
for
on
sure.
the name. And that was sort of the point.
So you were around, I mean, you say you bring Miller Lite into Canada. What was the formation of that? Not category, but the light
Yeah.
side of the industry. Because I remember there was like Coors Light and way back. I mean, we're going back quite a ways. Man, I date myself sometimes. But was it individuals asking for it? Because I mean, in that case, you're not just growing some hops and barley and all these things,
Sure.
and it's lower percentages. You're purposely making a light product.
Yeah.
What can you draw a line to in that side of
Yeah.
distribution and product and demographics and
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I haven't had that question before. That's a good one. I would say that, first of all, in beverage alcohol beverage alcohol, beer makes up 50% of all sales of beverage alcohol. So right away, beer is a huge, huge part of the beverage alcohol sale.
right?
And then inside of beer now, over the course of the last 30 years, since maybe even 40 years, Bud Light, Coors Light, really, and Miller Lite in the U.S. Those are the top three, and then you have like Modelo and Corona and Budweiser. They're all sitting
Right,
there.
right.
Heineken's, those are the top brands. So when we were Miller Canada, we were partners with Molson, and Molson had Coors Light, and obviously Coors Light for like 20 years grew and grew and grew and grew and grew,
Right.
and it was paying the bills and doing it. Coors Light could do no wrong. If you remember, like Coors Light Mystery Mansion,
Oh, yeah.
or Coors Light
Yeah.
like Maxim Golf, or
Yeah.
those were like the heydays of that kind of stuff. And so because we were in a contract with them, this is one of those political things. We couldn't launch Miller Lite into Canada because obviously it would eat the lunch of
Yeah.
Coors Light, even though we knew we would try to eat the lunch of Bud Light.
Yeah.
I think a normal consumer would just buy a light sort of thing. So we
Right.
spent a lot of time, I think, before we could even do it, trying to convince our partner why. So I spent a lot of time around the light category and how it's growing, and the trends that I think can correlate are like, there is a shift to health and wellness in beer and alcohol. So you see people drinking less beer.
But are they not just drinking more in beer? Or are they not just
They're drinking less volume. They're drinking, so the shift kind of went from, I just buy a 2-4 what I like, to I'll buy a 2-4 of light beer, to now I'll buy a 12-pack of light RTD because that doesn't make me heavy. And then that's now shift. The new trend is, it's a little bit light RTD or ready to drink with higher alcohol. So I can drink less, still get the buzz, and be in a light. So you can see this shift in alcohol over the course of the last 20 years to
crazy.
how do you enjoy alcohol lightly, even though it's masked in like, RTDs and sort of other things like that. But the pie of beer, for instance, is shrinking. And so, that took 25 years, 30 years. I just think of cannabis, like anything, it just moves a lot quicker. So in the 5 years of cannabis, I think we've kind of gotten to that point now where there was an opportunity for this light category. There was an opportunity to talk to consumers like my wife, who hadn't had a product yet. And I think that was really sort of some of the correlations you could draw between those two.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. That's smart.
Yeah.
So I had a question as you were talking about that. I was thinking about how, on the Bev Elk side, functional is becoming a big thing, right? It's a huge category. I have a friend that started one, sold it, did very well in it, non-alcoholic beverages.
Right.
And then I think I answered my own question in my head already, which is there ever a future where we're going to have non-psychoactive, I already know CBD, but where it's, I love the taste of this and just smoke a joint and is it CBD flower? Is that the future of non-potent cannabis? Is this people just be consuming CBG and
like a
CBD flower?
Yeah, maybe. I'm probably the complete wrong person to ask for that, because it's really, I think, it would come down to
I'm the wrong one
the
to be
occasion
posting
and the
it, I think.
effect of those things for people. But
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if it'll go that far, because I think, majority of the people that want THC want a little bit of like the effect of it, obviously.
Yeah. There is a medicinal quality regardless.
sure.
And that's the thing,
For sure.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the non-alc side of Bev Alc is a bit of a phenomenon, and but I think over time, you really see that in beer, non-alc beer. I'd say non-alc cocktails just become, sort of fancy cocktails in a way. But we'll see. I don't know.
Same price, same fanciness.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
where do you get your, so right now, and Wes, we forgot to touch on this earlier, was OCS is talking about they will be now supplying data to producer processors or operators. Excuse me. So one, I can't see that be nothing but an advantage, right? Because, hello, right? We need data to understand how
For
well
sure.
we're performing in market. But two is, what is your current feedback mechanism to understand it? Cannabis consumers are notoriously silent in the vast majority, right? Yeah, you get your subreddit guys and
Yeah.
you get your Instagram.
As an
and-
ex-Canopy person, that subreddit
Right,
is
oh boy,
very
yeah.
scarring. I have a lot of
Yeah.
damage, a lot of demons
This is-
inside there.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. But there's areas where you can garner some feedback about your
Yeah,
product,
for sure.
but it'd be key, I would think, with yours, with Lite Label, to truly understand what are they saying about it. So other than the feedback that you get where when you're pitching it, this is for me. The same as what I was saying when we first met. I'm like, dude, this is for me. Maybe not every day, but it's definitely one of those more functional opportunities for me. But what are you using to measure, hey, are they liking, do they love me?
Yeah,
Right?
it's a great question, and one that's evolving. We're not a big LP; we're a team of two. So, just from
Yeah.
a perspective, myself and my partner, and he is an agent. He owns an agency that's able to do design work and the creativity and all the. If you've seen a LinkedIn video from us, it's through him, and
Oh, right,
so
yep.
that's. And so, really, we're just a really tiny team. We have no big bank account to go pay for data sources or anything like that. We did this on our own, 100%.
So let me get this right, Grant. You're not paying for data deals to
We're
get shelf
not
space.
doing anything like that, and so so really, because we're sort of I guess we're in the infancy stage of this sort of read the room market. So really, we're focused in Ontario. We're focused only on a couple SKUs, right? And
Yeah.
we just shipped our first batch to BC actually a day ago, so we'll
Congrats
have
on
the
that.
BC and market. So really, through that, the buyers that have multi-unit operators, that have store operators, I should say, talking to the buyers, getting their bud tender feedback. We have an Instagram and LinkedIn site that get Lite Labeled, so people write to us on there actually. And then I'm pretty available, I guess, on LinkedIn or email, or so people have emailed me and texted me things. I got one this morning. It's like, oh my God, I just had a Lite Label. It was perfect for the day. I'm going to pick up some more. So we're getting a lot of that sort of general quantitative, feedback around the idea of it and the functional of it. I think over the course of the next year, as hopefully, knock on wood, we grow and we can start affording it. I think, having a real true feedback loop on what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, how we can improve.
Yeah.
Getting the specifics, like, mine didn't burn the perfect way it didn't go, or
Right.
like, hey, this one maybe felt a little harsh, or hey, the gummy, I ate all 10 and, I got, my effect
Full.
was X or whatever. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So right now it's very raw and organic for sure.
Yeah, it makes sense, man.
yeah.
You're a smaller team that's
it.
just really
Yeah.
trying to succeed and
That's it.
doing everything you can. But I think, your past and then your past experience from both yourself and your partner in this is you're at least using knowledge rather than just flying by the seat of your pants and hoping to hell that something's going to click. And that happens. That can happen for individuals and companies.
For sure.
But I think that, not being overly boisterous about, we're going to succeed, we're going to do this. And obviously that's what your, own manifestation is going to be, because that's what you want.
Yeah.
But you're not being overly confident or pompous about the fact that, listen, we've bookend and defined this. We're going to excel and succeed in this area. So kudos on that, because
Thank
I think
you.
that's fantastic. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And that's what I could wish for any business is humble yourself, understand that it takes time. It takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of kids wondering, where's dad, where's
Yep,
mom,
100%.
right?
Yep.
So I love that. Grant, we've been doing something as we're about to wrap and understand the next question. So I need to go back to this. We've been doing something really fun with our previous guests and our current guests, which is we ask a question of you that was posed by last week's guest, and then you get to pose one to the next week's incoming guest.
Okay.
So because you've tuned in, you may have already
heard a
seen that
few.
this happens.
Yes, I've
So
heard
you
a
may
few.
have a question already ready to go. Last week we had Amy Brown, Amy Anonymous from Hashco, and
Yes.
I mean,
she
a
was
million
great.
fucking things.
She was, oh my gosh. That
ball
was
of energy.
Oh,
Like, holy
yeah, that
shit.
was-
How do you keep up?
Yeah.
People
it's
say
so-
I have energy, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, that's what I love about this podcast, because, it's someone in my seat. I've been in it for 6 years in the cannabis space. You see sort of influencers, people's names through LinkedIn or through people that were in the legacy market, that were in Canopy and would talk about certain people or certain things. And you see them on different media outlets. But then, I didn't know much about her. You know what I mean? I knew her name
Right.
and stuff, but so being able to listen and hear the whole story, and I thought it was great. And then Todd the week before, 2 weeks before,
Oh yeah.
like so it's, and and then there's been people I know like Lisa Bigioni, so it's great. But there was things in there I didn't hear, so it was really I find it great. So yeah, I really love
appreciate
listening
that,
in.
and that's what really we're just trying to do, as we mentioned before. We just want to share stories, and we want to be able to capture these for the future, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Light is going to be normal, and there'll be multiple products within that category probably, but we didn't capture it, so now we've got it, right? It's set in stone. It's
We're trying. We're making it go.
Wes, who is it? Luke Skywalker? Who is it in stone again?
In what? Sorry.
In Star Wars, who was it that was in Frozen?
In Carbonate, Han Solo?
Han Solo.
You see in Carbonate. Han Solo, there you go. See, I can't fucking remember any of this stuff. Anyways, we've got a question from Amy Brown for you.
All right. So Amy last week asked, I think I kind of know what your answer is going to be here just based on your product. But how do you feel legalization has affected cannabis use overall in the form of, do you feel that it's simply the same demographic or group of people just now consuming more? Or do you actually feel that it's now opened up and there are more people consuming it than ever before?
Okay, yeah, good question. I think I have a few ways I'm going to think about and answer it. So I believe that the first 5 years or so of cannabis legalization, the effort really brought over people that were already buying it, whether they were hardcore or just, every so often from the street into the legal market. I would say from my group of friends and demographic, the ones that did participate in the category slowly got rid of, buying down the street, because that person actually probably got out of it themselves in many cases, to be honest, and have brought them over to the legal market, into the legal stores. And I think some of the hardcore group of those people over the last year have now come into and are finding products they like at the quality they believe is fit for them and all that kind of stuff. And so I do think the first little bit was really there wasn't a lot of opportunity to bring new consumers in, I guess. But I think during that 5-year time, because you saw so many stores open, because it was in the news, because you probably knew someone that worked in cannabis, there was thousands of us that got jobs in the space after that time, that in people's minds, it did become a lot more normal. And I think over the last 5 or 6 years in people's heads, and it became a lot more normal. It's like, yeah, you smell it in the street now, no one cares. If you go back 10 years ago, they're just walking down the street with it, and so I think that's normalized it a bit. And now I think the years ahead of us is really, the community of the cannabis community. If we really want to make a really great run at it, is, it's our job to now, strengthen the strengthen the segment and the category and bring more people into it, really, to help it grow, because, and that's on the backs of, new brands and new retail experiences and less regulations and all those kinds of things. And so I think the future in front of us, for sure, is going to be more and more non-participants in the category now, and coming in and finding things that they can, whether it starts with drinks and edibles and grows. I do think the past has really been a big significant jump to bring 70-80% of that illicit market over into the legal market.
Yeah,
very cool.
Well, perfect. Yeah, I think Lite Label is perfectly positioned to bring in those new consumers as well. So
that's part of my pitch to retailers. Awesome. I'm like, this brand. I had a retailer back a long time ago when I was in beverage alcohol, and he said, Tom Adams, who worked for the NSLC in Nova Scotia, and we were pitching an alcohol brand, and he was like, Grant, if you're just gonna steal share from someone else, it's gonna cost you. But if you're gonna bring in new consumers, I'll help you out. And so I always kept that in my head. And so that's part of my pitch when I'm talking to retailers. It's like, I think Lite Label plays an incremental opportunity in your basket, and I think it plays an incremental opportunity in your customers who's coming through the door. So, and I do think that the positioning of that light category in cannabis is something that will help bring in new people into the category.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
And I have friends that have never participated, and I know they're supporting me, but they're sending me pictures of like they had ordered it or bought it at their store. Yeah. And I know they're not in cannabis a lot,
Yeah. That's awesome.
Perfect. So
now, it's your turn.
Now we get to get you to ask a question of next week's guest.
Okay.
You don't know whether or not they are going to be directly in the industry or not. So they may be, maybe not. But what do you have for next week's guest?
Yeah, so I'm a big, I like hearing people's advice and counsel, and, I like always getting feedback. And so I would say it's a two-parter, which is, what's the best advice you've ever had in terms of business, and what's the best advice you've ever had in terms of a personal, piece of advice you've gotten. So I'm always
Very
interested
cool.
to hear what people have to say about that.
I love the answers that come in from those types of questions too. That's what I hone in on the most, I think, which is advice, right? And trying to surround yourselves by just incredible wisdom,
Yes.
to help you succeed. And it's funny because a lot of the messaging sometimes is almost repeat,
Yeah.
but we always need a checkup from the neck
For
up.
sure.
Always. And it's a consistent reminder. Manifest it. Be positive. Do what you can.
Yeah.
You can't change things that are out of your
nice, be
control.
kind.
Focus on it. Exactly. Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
Grant, it's been awesome spending the last hour-ish with you.
Yeah,
I don't know
thank
if it's
you.
more or less, but we love what you're doing with Lite Label, you and your partner. Continue it, right? We know that it's a drive and it takes time. Hopefully this will help. Not
Appreciate
sure.
it, yes.
We can't
I'm sure it will.
obviously advocate, but I can tell you personally, tried it. I loved it. I think it makes a lot of sense. So if you happen to see it, just try it out. Maybe don't try it out. I can't say that, right? But anyways,
can.
it's been a great time having you on. We
Yeah.
appreciate it, and much success for Lite Label.
Thank you. Yeah, the feeling's mutual. Really love what you guys are doing. I really value the time you've spent with me to talk about it and talk a bit about the industry. So thank you so much. Keep going. I love hearing your
Awesome.
podcasts. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
man. Appreciate it. All right.
Thanks,
All
man.
right. Thank you.
What do you think? You gonna head out and try some Lite Label? I still got some for you. Don't worry. I got some
Well, I
for
think
you.
it's probably the perfect thing to bring up north to this
Oh.
bachelor party with me, because
You
as
know what
much as
you
the
need?
bachelor, what?
Well, yes, you need Lite Label. You need CBD weed. Just
Yeah.
one
just to make it,
either keep up or look what I do all day, motherfucker.
yeah, make people's jaw hit the floor. Like, how the fuck does this guy do
This
it?
guy smokes all day long. I'm glad there was something in there because I know that prior to Grant coming on that we were able to talk about OCS and they're going to be sharing data, right? I don't know that world enough of how it was accessed, how often they put it out, but support your retailers, support your LPs, and the market will increase and get better and better and better. I could not imagine flying blind. I couldn't imagine, because what we do, there's heavy analytics. We understand everything we're doing, what's not working, what's working, and that's our goalpost, right? We understand. I couldn't imagine flying blind like some of these producer processors. Oh boy,
Crazy.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
It'd be nuts. But anyways, glad we could get him on. I told you, like, he's got. I know he didn't share some of the stories that he probably shouldn't have. But he was around for some rocky days at Canopy and being through it. I mean, rubbing shoulders with Seth, so that's got to be pretty cool. But pitching on behalf of and with, talk about wild. What a wild ride. And you would never think, right? Like, you've got a two-person team running Lite Label that has so much history in the industry, so much experience. I think that's wild. I'm glad we were able to share his story for sure.
Yeah, big success story, and looking forward to having him on again in a couple years, maybe, or a year, and see where he's at from there. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it'll
really
be
good.
wild. But anyways, well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know we have fun. We always have fun. That's why we're here. But anyways, thanks for tuning in to Legacies, everyone.